Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another evening of escapism and travel indulgence. This evening's Discover Evening is going to be given by Chris Breen, who many of you know, and he's going to be doing a talk about the Great Bear Rainforest in Canada. And as he was putting the presentation together, he thought, well, Canada offers so much more besides only the Great Bear Rainforest, and so he will also be elaborating on some other spectacular wildlife viewing opportunities in the country as well for bears and also whales. And I must apologise for our slightly delayed start this evening. We've had so many people sign up for this trip, and even as I talk to you now, I'm still admitting them. So, so apologies for the slightly delayed start with this evening. It is without a doubt our most popular talk yet. And as many of you know, this is the 12th, I think, of all of the talks that we've been given. So, so thank you very much for all of you who have joined us this evening, and especially to those of you who've enjoyed the talks that we've given thus far as well. As before, the same rules apply, please. If you wouldn't mind turning your camera off and keeping yourselves muted, we'd be very grateful for that. We're not expecting to have any technical glitches, but in the true fashion of travel, we would ask you to remain seated if we do encounter any turbulence, and just bear with us. But as I say, we're not expecting to have anything go wrong, but sometimes these things do happen. As always, we'll have some time at the very end to answer any questions that you might have. And the very best way, please, to submit those to us is using the chat function that is in Zoom. Depending on what you're viewing this on, whether it's an iPad or a PC, the chat function is available either at the bottom or at the top of the screen. And just submit your questions to us through the chat function, please. And I'll do my very best to collate those during the talk and ensure that we've answered as many of those as we possibly can at the very end of the presentation. So I'm not going to do the usual introduction for Wildlife Worldwide. You have all heard it before, but needless to say, being almost 30 years old now, next year will be the 30th birthday for Wildlife Worldwide. And as you all know, Chris founded the company all those years ago. And Chris, I think that I'm right in saying that Canada actually featured as one of the very early destinations that Wildlife Worldwide offered all those years ago in 1992. Is that correct?
It did. Well, I think it was probably the year after, actually, Nick. But when I set Wildlife Worldwide up, I was very much of the view that if people were interested in going to see lions and leopards and elephants and lovely things in Africa, they were probably interested in going to see bears and whales and all sorts of other cool things. And of course, Canada was right at the top of the list. So
well, yeah,
it was one of the very early ones.
Well, judging by tonight's take-up, Chris, I think you're right on the money there. As I say, it's the most popular talk that we put together, so it's certainly attracted.
Well, it's certainly not because I'm giving it, that's for sure.
Maybe it's because I'm hosting it. Who knows? But anyway, look,
yeah, Chris, almost certainly.
Chris, I'll hand over to you now. But as I said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I have to say that it's wonderful for us as a company to be able to put these things on, because I hope for all of you that have seen one of these before, some of the passion and the interest and the knowledge that we have we find it so liberating during these times to be able to share it with you all, and I do hope that you're getting as much out of these talks as we are, because we really are enjoying this opportunity to be able to talk with you all just about these wonderful destinations and the great wildlife that we can see out there. So thank you all so much, and enjoy the presentation this evening. And Chris, I'll hand over to you, and I'll come back to you with any questions that we've received during the talk at the very end.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Nick. and just want to echo Nick's thanks for you all joining us this evening. So yeah, thank you very much indeed. One or two minor adjustments to my screen and how I'm seeing things in front of me. So I thought it would be nice, in addition to having a look at the Great Bear Rainforest, which I know is what you're all here to see, but I thought it'd be quite nice to just have a quick look at one or two other places in Canada that we visit as well, very much on the theme of whales and bears, of course. So to begin with, if my computer is doing what it should do, I just thought I'd give you a quick look at the map of Canada. And I just need to make another minor adjustment, forgive me. But I think you should be able to see my mouse here. And although I'm not going to talk about this part of Canada, this little bit down here, which I'm showing down in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, north and west, well, I guess primarily west of Halifax, is a magnificent area called the Bay of Fundy, which is really fantastic from a whale watching point of view, and very much worth considering. This is the place to go and see northern right whales, and there's not huge numbers of northern right whales left in the world, but many of them come to this area in the summer months. Worth also considering this, the St. Lawrence River, or the this big opening here, which heads all the way down towards Quebec. But this is a fantastic area for whale watching as well. I was there 2 or 3 years ago and did a most fabulous whale watching morning. In fact, I did a number of them, but on one particular morning we had 6 different species of whale, including blue whale, because this is where the blue whales come to. Some of the blue whales come to in the summer months. That's pretty amazing. Well worth considering that. Obviously, from the point of view of bear watching, and polar bear watching particularly, you need to be thinking about Churchill in due course. So I'm not going to be talking about any of those places this evening, but we are going to have a quick look up here, up to Baffin Island and up onto Pond Inlet. We are going to have a very quick look over into the Yukon over here on the western side of Canada, northwestern side of Canada. We're going to have a very quick look into the northwestern corner of British Columbia, and then we are going to come down to the Great Bear Rainforest, this lovely area here. So we shall begin with a trip to Baffin Island and the flow edge. Returning to this map, we'll return to the map at various points along the way, along our journey. In order to get to Baffin Island, this gigantic island here, you have to fly into Ottawa, and just depending on the time of arrival, but generally speaking, you will have to overnight, and then you would fly from Ottawa up to Iqaluit. You probably won't have to overnight in Iqaluit before you then fly up to Pond Inlet. But it's remote and very interesting and rather wonderful when you get there. It's a small place, Pond Inlet. It's a small village, I guess. It's very beautiful. It is obviously incredibly remote, and it sits on the edge of what you can see in front of you here, which is about 22 miles of sea ice, which is pretty amazing. And right the way up until late June, early July, the sea remains frozen here. It only unfreezes for a relatively short period of time. In order to get to the best place, which is called the flow edge, that point at which the sea begins to, or the sea is sort of breaking up and starting to flow, you travel out by Skidoo with these gigantic shoeboxes on the back. You travel out Skidoo, being careful not to fall into any of the large cracks in the ice, of which there are a number. And you get to this rather magnificent camp, which is pretty close to the flow edge. It's very simple. You can see in the background here, this is the cooking and dining tent. And these are the tents that we stay in, tents that we sleep in. They are triple lined tents with lovely heaters inside and lots of insulation, and they are extremely warm. But there was one thing that kept me awake for a lot of the night, which was a slightly absurd thought, since the sea ice is probably 15 or 20 foot thick here, but was this absurd thought that I might wake up and find that I was completely submerged. Thankfully, that didn't happen. The reason why I'm showing this, and the reason why people come to this particular point, is in order to go out and see whales and hopefully to see polar bears. I was there for 4 or 5 days. This was a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I was there for 4 or 5 days, and we had fantastic views of these guys, these bowhead whales. Literally sitting at flow edge, watching the ice going past us, and every now and again there would be a bowhead whale. They are absolutely gigantic, and they're feeding immediately underneath the ice, right on the edge of the ice. But of course you don't hear them, you don't see them, you don't know they're there until all of a sudden you hear this most fabulous blow, and suddenly there they are. And then they disappear again. But the experience there is really quite wonderful. This was actually one of our guides who was making use of his GoPro and got some wonderful footage of the bowheads coming right up and actually directly underneath him. The activities here are, as they are actually with bear watching throughout, this is a theme we'll come back to during the course of the evening, but you tend to spend, as I'm sure many of you have done this already, but you tend to spend extended periods of time sitting and watching and waiting, sitting and watching and waiting quietly. So it's naturally rather different to going on an African safari, of course, but rather wonderful nonetheless. But you have to be prepared for the conditions. Of course, it's obviously very cold. There can be high winds. But it really is a magnificent experience, a really wonderful, wonderful experience. And of course, the other thing at this time of year, which as I say is May, June, is that there is a big migration of narwhal that come up the coast here. And there are good opportunities to see narwhal. We had good sightings of narwhal, but they were very distant for us. I know that the previous week and the following week they had much closer encounters with narwhal, but you know, that's worth knowing. It is also worth saying that they are hunted, the bowheads aren't, but the narwhal are, so that's quite an unusual experience. It's not something that of course we go anywhere near. If we can help it, we don't obviously get involved in any way, shape or form, but it is just something worth bearing in mind. But the local people there are becoming much more conscious of the tourism, limited tourism scene and tourism season, but it is just worth mentioning that. And there's polar bears here. So I say that was just a quick flit up into that part of the world, because it seemed like a good idea, and it begins to provide context for the other bits and pieces that we're going to see and do during the course of this evening. Moving on, we are now going to head up into the Yukon, and heading to the Yukon, and particularly right up to the Arctic Circle and to this particular place, this place called Bear Cave Mountain, which is an extraordinarily remote place. All the places I'm going to show you are remote. This is extremely remote and requires a certain amount of energy and effort to get to, of course, as all of these places do. In order to get here, what we have to do is we have to fly from Vancouver, we then fly to, we have to overnight in Vancouver, we then fly to Whitehorse, and we have to overnight in Whitehorse. We then fly up to Dawson City, and we have to overnight again in Dawson City, possibly for more than one night. And then we go by helicopter from Dawson City up into Bear Cave Mountain. This is remote. This is very, very remote. Excuse me 1 second. Apologies, I have an incredibly itchy nose because I have a number of dogs around me. So forgive me for that. Where we're going to here at Bear Cave Mountain is incredibly remote. We're flying here by helicopter. It's about 2.5 hours by helicopter. We sometimes stop en route before we get to Bear Cave Mountain. But the scenery is truly magnificent. It's really just wonderful all the way up. The scenery is fantastic. And when we arrive, we land literally on the bank of the river. And from there, it's a very, very short walk to camp. And this is camp. This area where Bear Cave Mountain is a wilderness area of about 6,500 square kilometers, and only 6 visitors are allowed into this entire 6,500 square kilometers at any one time. And this is where we stay. What you can see here is the kitchen and dining area. This is one of the cabins that accommodates 2 people, and there's another one of these a little bit further over the other side. Shared shower, shared toilet. So there's only 6 people here. There's a guide, there's a cook, and there's 4 guests. And we visit here in October, end of September and October, where the salmon run is finished in most places, but in actual fact here, it's still going because for some peculiar reason, the running water here in the river is relatively warm. I say relatively warm because the temperature outside is anywhere between about -10 and -20. The really cool thing about that is it means that when these guys go fishing, and there's a number of them here, a number of these brown bears or grizzly bears here, when they go fishing, they dive in and they come straight back out, and their fur just freezes immediately, which is just a fabulous sight. This is a pretty sedentary bear viewing experience. We literally walk from the camp, perhaps no more on any occasion, no more than 150 meters to where we're going to sit and just sit and watch and wait. And these bears will literally walk right next to us. It's the most wonderful experience. They will walk right next to us. They'll walk right past us. This is a cub, and this is her mum. And they were very, very happy to have us nearby and very happy to walk directly past us within 3 or 4 feet of us, within a couple of meters of us. It's a spectacular experience. Of course, the logistics and the amount of time it takes to get there and the fact that you're traveling by helicopter to get into this location also means that it doesn't come cheap, as I'm sure you can imagine. But more details on that if you'd like those details from us at some point in the future. From here, we are going to go to a place called the Taku River. The Taku River also requires helicopter activity to get to. It requires a flight into Vancouver, a flight to Whitehorse again, which is here. It then requires a drive to a place called Atlin. And it's a beautiful drive, 2 or 3 hours drive to Atlin, and then a helicopter journey from Atlin a little bit south, just here, to another First Nations reserve, where there is another bears or grizzly bears. The season here is very, very short. The season is approximately 4 or 5 weeks long. It's a very short season. Again, we land by helicopter right on the edge of the river, and the accommodation here is incredibly simple. Hopefully you can see my mouse again. This, as you can tell, is one of the rooms. It has a wardrobe with hanging facilities, which is here. It has a chest of drawers, which is a shelf, which is here. It has a lovely wood burning stove, and there's some wood outside, and extremely comfortable beds. And it then has a dining facility, which is here, and a lovely deck. I mention this because I was given special permission to stand off the deck in order to take this photograph, because the 2 guys that run this place are very much of the view, quite correctly, that this place is entirely for the bears, and that the more of our footprints, the more of an impression we make on the place, the less likely it is that the bears will come back. So we generally don't get off the deck here. It's very simple. Again, there's only 6 or 8 people that are allowed into this area at any one time. It's entirely focused on photography, as you can see. We've been out photographing from the deck. We come back in and, or photographing from the deck, I should say, or one of the other points. There are certain viewing points a little bit further down the river, and then we'll spend time here, obviously, having a coffee or a chat and working on our photography and so on. The bear viewing from here, again, is absolutely magnificent. And I just ask you to note the colour of this bear, or these bears that I've got coming up, because they're very different in colour to some of the other bears that we'll see a bit later on, further out on the Pacific coast. Again, bear viewing opportunities here are just wonderful. It's again a relatively sedentary activity, but actually I think in some respects bear viewing is a pretty sedentary activity. It's a sort of thing which you really need to sit and watch and wait and absorb and just wait for things to happen. We'd visited this particular spot. I should say that the camp is much further back. Camp is up here by, I don't know, half a kilometre or so, and we'd walked down to this location. There were 3 or 4 of us. We'd been here for 2 or 3 days, and we'd seen this particular bear every day. This is a bear called Sunny, and every single day this bear had walked on the other side of this rather large fallen tree. So we were expecting her to do exactly the same thing today, but of course she decided not to, and she decided to walk right past us, again within just a few feet, a metre or so. You can see the camera of the chap that sat in front of me, and this photo was taken from the deck. So I was standing where that particular bear, I was standing, taking my photograph from the point where that particular bear is standing there. And when we had a barbecue in the evening, and Phil, who runs this particular camp, was cooking salmon for dinner, because of course there's a lot of salmon in the river, the bear was, to all intents and purposes, sitting right next to the barbecue, probably 2 or 3 meters away. But there's that much confidence and that much trust in the bears around here that they're really quite happy for that to be the case. They've not been attacked or predated, and they're perfectly comfortable with people. And from a photographer's point of view, well, actually from anybody's point of view, but from a photographer's point of view, that is an extraordinary experience, a really extraordinary experience, and a truly wonderful experience. So look, that was our quick hop to those parts of Canada which are not on the Pacific coast and not in the Great Bear Rainforest. So, so I'm now going to take you around the Pacific coast for the latter part of this presentation. And just two places, point one or two places out to you. I'm sure you're all reasonably familiar with, well, I don't know, maybe not. Hopefully, some of you are reasonably familiar with this map, reasonably familiar with the geography of this part of Canada, which for me is really the most beautiful part of Canada. It's a truly magnificent part of the world, and in some respects, for me, feels a bit like a second home. I've been lucky enough to go here many times. So we'll have a quick look at Vancouver. We'll have a quick look at Sydney and Victoria. We'll talk a bit about Campbell River and Glendale Cove. We'll then go up to Bella Bella and Clementou. We'll have a bit of a think about Princess Royal Island and have a look inside some of these fjords here as we go along. Oops, that's interesting. Let's see what happens. Okay, just another map. Being a geography student, as I was many years ago, if I can remember back that far, I've always loved maps. So this is just a slightly different representation of what we were looking at just now. The Great Bear Rainforest, as you can see, is this great big stretch all the way down here, which has become known as the Great Bear Rainforest as a result of some rather snazzy marketing 10 or 15 years ago by a number of different conservation groups. So it's now known as the Great Bear Rainforest, and the sea which adjoins the Great Bear Rainforest is increasingly known as the Great Bear Sea, which is rather nice. I like that. We'll also have, yeah, it's also worth mentioning, of course, as I say, Vancouver Island and so on, which is also rather magnificent. Let's just have a very quick look in Vancouver. Just a couple of different slides of Vancouver. I've loved Vancouver. I've been there many times now. There's something really fabulous about it. Lots of old buildings and lots of modern buildings, and I like the juxtaposition of those two. So it is in many ways a very modern place. It's a place also that is actually on the north side of Vancouver, quite full of wildlife. It's a place where you can just sit in the coffee shop. You can watch the float planes coming in and out. That's amazing. That's just a lovely thing to do. You know, you can cycle in Stanley Park. You can go for lovely walks in Stanley Park. You can get the ferry across to the other side. You can go for walks in the mountains. It's just brilliant. It's a fantastic city. I'm not a great city lover, but it's a fantastic city, and it's a lovely place to visit. And of course, it's the gateway to everything that we see and do on the Pacific coast of Canada. So from Vancouver, we will often fly over to a place called Sydney. Well, actually, we'll fly to Victoria, but curiously, the airport in Victoria is actually located at Sydney, just to make life very confusing. Anyway, so we'll fly over to Sydney, and Sydney is a fantastic place to go whale watching from. We work with these guys who have the imaginatively named company Sydney Whale Watching, but it does what it says on the tin. We like these guys a lot. They were the first ones there operating out of Sydney. There's a lot of whale watching companies operating out of Victoria, but the whole of that part of the coast, that southeastern part of Vancouver Island, offshore southeastern part of Vancouver Island, is fantastic, fantastic for whale watching. And particularly, of course, it's fantastic for orcas. This is the place which is home to 3 well-documented pods of orcas, J pod, K pod, and L pod. They are seen continuously. K-pod is one of note. It's one that there's a very famous orca called Grandma, or K2. She died 4 years ago now, I think, in 2017, but she was known to be about 105 years old when she died, which is wonderful. You know, those sorts of statistics are fascinating. I should also mention that the bowhead whales we were looking at when we were on Baffin Island, I mean, they're known to be can be over 200 years old. That's pretty amazing stuff. 3 different types of orcas, and all 3 types are known to visit this part. There are, of course, resident orcas, but there are transient orcas and there are offshore orcas as well. They're all the same species, but they have different prey, and they're identifiable by their different call sounds. So again, lots of research being done on that. I find that sort of stuff very interesting. It's the sort of thing that we like to learn about when we're out and about. I think I know I speak for myself. I know I speak for many of you who enjoy traveling on our trips and enjoy visiting these rather magnificent parts of the world. So look, from that was just a quick whiz down here. So Victoria and Sydney, as I say, and this is fabulous whale watching, all of this bit here. Of course, there's also wonderful whale watching up here as well. At certain times of year, this is where the grey whales, and you guys, many of you know how passionate I am about Baja, California, but this is where many of the grey whales are migrating up here and then right the way up further north. So look, we're going to go now to a place called Klemtu. Klemtu is here. And we can fly from Vancouver to Klemtu. And we can fly from Vancouver to Bella Bella. And we sometimes fly to one and sometimes fly to the other. There's more flights into Bella Bella than there are to Klemtu. We are flying over magnificent scenery. The scenery here is spectacular. Many of you will have flown over it, of course. Many of you will have been in it. There are sometimes scars on the mountaintops. You can see there some scars from logging, but there is a certain amount of control over that, of course, and that was one of the reasons why the Great Bear Rainforest was formed. Quite often when we're flying, we are flying in these rather lovely flying boats. This is an old flying boat. It's still in regular service. Can you believe, nearly 100 years old? This is a flying boat called a Goose. It was built, this particular one was built in 1939, but still in regular daily service up the coast here. When I first, this is how much of a div I am, I'm afraid, but when I first saw this sitting at this angle, I assumed that it probably had an unfortunate end because it's sitting at a rather peculiar angle, but this is exactly how they're supposed to be, which is why there are floats on the end of the wings. Anyway, that was a few years ago. But this is Klemtu. We've arrived in Klemtu. It's a small village in a very active conservation-based community. This is the village. This is the float plane terminal. As you can see, there are plenty of boats there. It's a fishing community. There are no roads here. It has a beautiful lodge, which is walking distance from the float plane terminal, called Spirit Bear Lodge. I suspect a number of you have stayed here. I've been here a number of times and had some wonderful bear viewing, which we'll look at in a minute. I've also had some other amazing things here. A fight to the death from 2 hummingbirds. How about that? I was sat having a cup of tea, and you might just be able to see here, there's a hummingbird feeder there. And I was sat on the deck having a coffee, and there was a pair of hummingbirds, and all sorts of, it was a major sword fight. And about 5 minutes later, one of them dropped dead. That was slightly surprising. And then a couple of minutes later, I could hear this fabulous blow, and I turned around and I looked out into the bay just outside the lodge, and there was a pair of humpbacks cruising past. So in the Clem too, and the First Nations people here, as elsewhere, are wonderfully welcoming and tremendous people whose company we enjoy. We always take time to go to their big house, which is what this is called, and hear some of their stories after a day of bear watching or whale watching. It's a lovely community centre, effectively, that they're very proud of, as you can imagine, quite rightly so. But bear watching is very important, of course. This is why we're here. Bear watching here is quite different to one or two of the other places we're going to look at a little bit later on. Bear watching here involves sitting on a log, perhaps. There are 2 or 3 or 4 different locations that we visit. We have to go to those locations by boat. And the boat journeys will be anything from half an hour, 45 minutes, up to an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to the bear viewing spots. And then we will sit there for extended periods of time. Sometimes we get close to the bears, sometimes we don't. Sometimes they are bears in the distance, in a sense. This is a reasonably distant bear. You'll note the colour, quite different to the bears in Taku River. Same species, but the bears in the Taku River are gingery, rather beautiful ginger colour. This guy here, as you can see, is a very dark, sort of grizzled brown colour. But lovely to see them in the context of this fabulous backdrop. Quite distant. They're down at the shore, looking for dead fish and other bits and pieces to eat. Sometimes they get closer. Of course, we're with guides. None of the guides are armed, but we all have quite loud voices if need be. I'm not a guide here, incidentally, but I do enjoy accompanying the trips, as you can imagine, and having been a number of times, you kind of you get into the swing of it, and you know, of course, when to be quiet and when to make a noise. We were sitting on a log here. I think there were half a dozen or so of us sat on the log. There was a mum and 3 cubs, and this cub here that is staring at us. I say it's a cub. It's probably three and a half years old, but still moving around with mum, who is the bear on the very right of the picture. And he took quite a keen interest in us and came very close to us. Mum wasn't very happy about it. Mum was very comfortable with us. Mum came over and gave him a wallop and clearly told him to disappear off. So being a fairly typical teenager, this was mum, who, as I say, was very comfortable with us. But being a fairly typical teenager, he then disappeared off and then had a fight with one of his brothers. Typical teenage behaviour, but rather fantastic to see. At a different location, but also from Spirit Bear Lodge, this was a black bear, not a grizzly bear, but a black bear that we saw wandering along one of the paths, actually wandering along a path towards us as we were wandering along the same path. He stopped for a couple of seconds, saw us, had a quick sniff, and then disappeared off. A magical, delightful, wonderful encounter enjoyed by all of us, as you can imagine. So from here, we're going to go to Night Inlet Lodge. And Night Inlet Lodge is in a place called Glendale Cove. This elbow-shaped inlet here, or fjord, is called Night Inlet. And in this southwestern corner is Glendale Cove. And in Glendale Cove is Night Inlet Lodge. Many of you may have been there. In order to get there, again, just so you know, we fly into Vancouver. Surprise, surprise, that's our hub for everything on the Pacific coast. From Vancouver, we fly across to Campbell River, where we spend a night. Wonderful whale watching from here too. Actually, when I was there last time, I was just walking along the river from our hotel in Campbell River, and there were humpbacks here. Which is very nice to see. So we spend the night in Campbell River, and then we fly across by light aircraft float plane to Glendale Cove and to Night Inlet Lodge. Night Inlet Lodge is set in the most magnificent place in a truly beautiful fjord in a beautiful location. A few years ago, the lodge burned down. In typical Canadian fashion, there happened to be a spare floating wilderness lodge elsewhere on the coast. So they floated it up here. Who would have thought there'd be a spare floating wilderness lodge? Anyway, they then made various adaptations to it and have turned it into just the most wonderful, wonderful lodge. All of the rooms, it can accommodate about between 30 and 35 people. All of the rooms are beautifully appointed. They all have ensuite facilities. There's a lovely dining room. The food is superb. The guiding is fantastic. When I went there 2 or 3 years ago, we landed, I walked into my room, and this was the view from my window, which was quite nice. So this was immediately behind my room, and this was a black bear that had just been down and had, as you can see, caught a fish and consumed it, and was just sat there. From the lodge, there are, of course, beautiful views. This is looking out of the lodge across to the other side of the fjord, and everywhere you look, the scenery is huge. The scenery is beautiful, and there are opportunities here to get out on boats. Everything you do from Night Inlet Lodge begins by boat, and whether it's going up to the inlet, where there will invariably be bears, sometimes mums and cubs, as you can see here playing, or whether it's going by kayak, there are bears. Now, one thing about Night Inlet Lodge is that you are on bear stands, so you're slightly raised up. So from a photographer's point of view, for some people, maybe this isn't quite so satisfactory. But what I wanted to do was, because you have a slightly higher vantage point, what I wanted to do was show you some pictures. All of these have been taken from stands. So you're not quite at eye level, but if you get your angles right, you can still get some pretty amazing views of the bears. They're coming in to, of course, feed. They're coming in to explore. They're coming in to see what's around. But there are some truly wonderful bears here. And whether they are exploring or whether they're feeding, the photographic opportunities here really are quite wonderful, as you can see. I love the color of the water here. Is just stunning, I think. It's not just about the bears, though. There are other things here too, including, of course, things like northwestern crow, I beg your pardon, and bald eagles, of which there are plenty. And for anybody who stays here for more than 3 nights, they also offer some rather wonderful opportunities to go out by boat out into the Johnstone Strait. And the Johnstone Strait is that bit of water that runs between Vancouver Island and the mainland. And out in the Johnstone Strait, of course, there's again yet more fantastic whale watching. What could be better than that? Humpback whales. Humpback whales with their incredibly small dorsal fin and that lovely rolling, graceful motion that they have as they just sort of cruise through the water. Largely between July and September is also, of course, or July and September, July and October is also, of course, the best time to go and see the bears too. So it's a win-win. And of course, the humpbacks, as you will all have seen humpbacks, I'm quite sure, but have this huge, great pectoral fin. This is also the time when, if you're going to see bubblenet feeding activity, this is the time when you'll see that activity. And more on that later, because we've got some other cracking shots of bubblenet feeding later. But this was just, these were a couple of lucky shots that I had when I was there a year or two ago. Again, more orcas, and also out in the Johnstone Strait, opportunities to see things like Pacific white-sided dolphin. What an amazing animal this is, riding the bow waves. I was here with a pal of mine a couple of years ago, and this particular encounter was with 200 plus Pacific white-sided dolphins. Goodness knows what speed we were traveling, but they were overtaking us, you know, as if we were on tricycles and they were in Ferraris. They are super fast. They are just amazing, amazing. Amazing things to see. And of course, other things to see here include things like Steller sea lions, which are the largest, one of the largest of the pinnipeds, walrus and elephant seals, the only ones being larger. So then to the final stretch, the last part of our journey in Canada, the last part of our journey into this part of Canada. And the last part of this evening is a visit still within the Great Bear Rainforest. But our journey in the Great Bear Rainforest now is going to begin in Bella Bella, and we're going to go deeper in, and this time by boat. Before we do that, I have marked Bella Coola on the map here because there is another wonderful lodge, which I'm not going to talk about this evening, but there's another wonderful lodge here in Bella Coola where there's also some great bear watching opportunities. But flying into Bella Bella and sometimes spending a night there or not spending a night there, and incidentally, there's some fantastic opportunities out of Bella Bella to find and photograph sea otters. There's quite an interesting community of sea otters. But what we sometimes do from here, and we work with a wonderful local company, and we often charter trips. So some of you may have done this with us in the past, or if not, maybe you're doing it with us in the future, but is to board this rather lovely boat called Island Roma, and or its sister vessel called the Island Odyssey. 16 berths, 8 cabins, 4 crew. 4 crew. One of them is a cook who will be a wildlife enthusiast and undoubtedly very knowledgeable about wildlife. Both the captain and the first mate will be naturalists, and there will be a dedicated naturalist on board. They are beautifully appointed boats, absolutely beautifully appointed. I don't have any images, unfortunately, of the downstairs interior. This is the upstairs. This is sort of the the wheelhouse where we eat and we sit up top, watching the world go by. Of course, it's a wonderful place for whale watching and so on, and looking out for bears and wildlife. And of course, in a small boat like this, being to use a Zambian phrase, being movious, being able to get around and go from place to place to place. We're able to get into some of the nooks and crannies that maybe we wouldn't get into if we were staying at a lodge. And of course, there are kayaks on board, as you will have seen, and there are zodiacs on board, which offer, which enable us to get off the boat and to walk. But one of the lovely things about being on board and being on a boat and traveling from place to place to place is the opportunity to see whales. And this particular I remember rightly, was a transient group, was with us, or perhaps more accurately, we were with them for about 30 minutes or more. That probably wouldn't have happened if we'd been staying at a lodge. So staying on the boat was wonderful. And no great issues in terms of seasickness or anything like that, because the waters are very sheltered, and so the waters are incredibly calm. I mentioned bubble net feeding, and the next few shots, the next 4 shots were taken by Alan Brackley, who hopefully is on board this evening, who very kindly a few days ago offered me the opportunity to show these, because Alan was traveling with us on board Island Odyssey in September 2019 and had some of the most fantastic bubble netting sightings, better than I've ever seen. I've only ever seen it once. I think Alan was telling me that they had a number of wonderful bubble net opportunities. But look at this, what fantastic photos, and you know, amazing backdrop, amazing photography, just really, really spectacular. Of course, really good luck. We wouldn't dare to guarantee anything like this, but by crikey, if you see it, you'll know it, and for sure you'll never forget. So Alan, thank you very, very much for those shots. I'm not sure, Alan, if you've seen this one, but I hadn't. This next shot was taken by my pal and pal of many of us on board, Nick Garbett, who I suspect, Alan, was on your trip. But this was taken by Nick with his drone, clearly of a bubble netting encounter. But a rather amazing shot nonetheless, and a couple of other shots of Nick's with Roma in the background and the whales bubble net feeding in the foreground. So thank you, Nick, for these shots as well. Exploring on shore is a lovely thing to be able to do, and if we're on board Roma, we're able to do that in a number of different locations. Sometimes on boardwalks, which of course is nice and comfortable, sometimes not on boardwalks. But having the opportunity to get out and see some of the sacred sites, being guided, if you like, introduced to some of these sacred sites by some of the wonderful First Nations guides is particularly nice, because they are able to explain in their own and rather wonderful words about the significance of some of these beautiful locations and these beautiful sites, which are invariably in a unique mix of mountains and fjords and wildlife. From this location, if you were looking in the other direction, this is what you would see. Can there be any more magnificent place to sit and watch the world go by than a location like that? And of course, it's not just about the bears. I mentioned that before. It's also about other things. It's about beavers. It's about birds. It's about trees and landscape generally. But of course, bears are the big thing, aren't they? Bears really are the big thing, and Canada is the place to see them. Princess Royal Island, just to sort of conclude, Princess Royal Island is the place to see bears, the place to see some of the most special bears of all, bears that have never been predated. This is a big male black bear, as you can see. This is a black bear that's bulky. This is right at the end of the season. This will be in mid to late September. It's a really powerful animal, and it's pretty close to us. Black bears, of course, are very intelligent, and they are found as far south and just on the outskirts of Vancouver. And in fact, a pal of mine who lives just on the outskirts of Vancouver occasionally sees one sitting on his next door neighbour's garage roof as he returns from work. And that would give you a surprise, wouldn't it? But what a lovely thing to see. But there are no black bears quite so special as the none so special as the spirit bears, and these are white black bears. These are honey-coloured black bears, and these are unique to this area, deep into the Great Bear Rainforest, on Princess Royal Island particularly, where 10% of the population of black bears are this fabulous honey colour. So there's only about 150 of these magnificent bears anywhere in the world. And I first heard about them when I read a copy of the BBC Wildlife magazine, which I think was April 1995, the April 1995 edition, and I still have it in my desk at work, as a number of my colleagues would be able to confirm. And I first read about these spirit bears in that magazine. The thing that just totally and utterly turned me on to the possibility of going to see them was the article which described a BBC cameraman who was standing astride two boulders, one leg on each boulder, with his camera facing away from him, of course, in order to film spirit bears coming towards him. And to his surprise, a spirit bear walked between his legs and underneath the tripod of his camera and walked away from him. And I thought, I have just got to one day witness these most wonderful animals, and I've been lucky enough to do that. It's quite common to see spirit bears with a black bear. You will have seen the black bear in the background there on this image. It's very easy in relative terms to get close to these guys. Again, they're not bothered by us at all. It's common, common perhaps is the wrong word, but it's not unusual to see a black bear with white cubs, or a black bear with a white and a black cub. They're not albino, they are honey coloured. They do actually have a colour. It's a recessive gene, I believe. I'm not a biologist, but it's a recessive gene that gives this wonderful colour. And really, there can probably be no better way to end this evening's presentation than with a spirit bear. So with that, I shall hand back to Nick, who with any luck is still awake, and see if anybody has any questions, which I should be delighted to answer.
I am very much awake, Chris. That was wonderful. And I've remembered to unmute myself as well. He said,
spot of genius there, Nick. Well
yes,
done.
yeah, perfect. Chris, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. That really was just terrific. And seeing those images, particularly the images of the area of Great Bear Rainforest, I mean, you can just taste that beautiful, fresh, clean air there just from those images. It's what a wonderful environment to go and experience, and to go and see the wildlife in. You know, surely that just adds to the whole experience of viewing incredible wildlife there. I've got no doubt. I've never been myself, sadly, but it just adds to the event, I'm sure.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. It really is superb. It's one of the best places on earth. I mean, there's 2 or 3 places in the world about which you've heard me say that on more than one occasion.
Well, yes.
One of them is Zambia, one of them is the Great Bear Rainforest, one of them is Baja, California, and the other is Wrangel Island.
Well, we've got to keep the questions on Great Bear Rainforest for tonight, Chris. We need to, and we've had a number of them as well, not just on Great Bear Rainforest, but also on the other areas that you mentioned at the start of the presentation. So what I've done, everyone, as is usual, there have been there's been a tsunami of questions coming in throughout the presentation. So if that is the correct collective noun for
questions, yes, it is. A tsunami is, yeah. Perhaps I checked it earlier.
Perhaps we can think of one anyway. And they are coming in thick and fast as I speak as well. So what I'll do is ask you a few questions now, and while you're answering some of those, Chris, I'll delve into the chat just to...
Can I ask you a question first?
Sure.
Can you please only ask me easy questions?
Okay. How many bears are there in Canada? Question one. No. Right.
Yeah, lots.
Fiona, thank you very much for joining us this evening. And I'm going to ask this question first because you were the first one in with a question. And Chris, it is a pretty simple one because you've been there yourself, I know. And I know when you came back, you were just kind of bouncing off the walls about it. So it's about ice bears, okay?
Yep.
And it's a photographic question, which is also good for you. So Fiona's question really was to do with clothing. How prepared do you need to be for the temperatures up there?
Yep.
But also, what effect do the temperatures, if any, have on the cameras?
Okay, two-part question. You need to take warm gear, lots of warm gear. However, we provide, if you were going to do that trip, if you were going to go to that area, we provide a pack. So part of the trip includes the provision of ultra warm gear, basically Arctic gear, which will be waiting for you at the hotel in Dawson. No, it won't. It'll be waiting for you at the hotel in Whitehorse. I beg your pardon.
Yep.
So you arrive, you check in, and you're given basically a kit bag that's got all of the kit that you need, all of the cold weather gear. In respect of cameras and how the cold weather affects the cameras, I didn't have any problems at all. So it's cold outside and it's dry. It's not cold and damp. I think if it been cold and damp, I probably would have had different issues. One of the things that the cold weather does do, of course, is drain your batteries quickly. But it's only a very short walk from any of the places that you're sitting in order to get back and recharge the batteries. So that's not an issue, but I made sure I had a pocket full of fully charged batteries, and they're in my pockets keeping warm. But it shouldn't be too much of an issue. And even less of an issue with mirrorless cameras, of course, but yeah.
Yeah. Great. And from Alan, Alan was asking about the Great Bear Rainforest. So they flew into Terrace. Is there any advantage in flying to any of the other airports in the area?
No, not particularly. It just will depend on where the trip's departing from. So some of the trips aboard that we charter aboard Roma or Island Odyssey will be departing from Terrace. Generally speaking, they'll be going up into the Kutsumateen, which is a little bit further north, or they may be coming south. Or if you were starting in the south and heading north, you would be flying into Bella Bella. But no, there's no. Well, the advantage is that the boat will be where you're flying into.
Yeah, sure.
But other than that, from a bear watching point of view, no advantage.
Okay, fine. And you mentioned a number of places there. Claire wanted to. Thank you, Claire, for the question. She just wanted a bit of clarification with the photos that you're showing towards the end of the bubble net feeding, etc. That was all while talking about the Island Odyssey, that wonderful vessel. Whereabouts were those photographs taken? What is the area that does the Island Odyssey just operate in one particular area, or does it just go where you want it to go?
No. So the Island Odyssey has a it has its own schedule, and we sell into that schedule. We've been selling that for many years.
Yeah.
But we also charter Island Odyssey and Island Roma periodically. And I've been on board a number of times, as has Nick Garbett. And when we charter it, we work with the guys that operate it to plan the itinerary. So it's not a completely random itinerary, but we know broadly speaking what the itinerary will be. So it's an expedition voyage type itineraries with certain planned stops, which may vary depending on the wildlife that we see. It will generally, I mean, more often than not, we are boarding in Bella Bella and we're heading north. Sometimes, as was mentioned a minute or two ago, we'll be boarding in Terrace and heading south. But all of the bubble net feeding shots, I don't know exactly where the point was that Alan took his bubble net feeding shots, but they will be on those inside passage channels. Broadly speaking, between Terrace and Bella Bella at some point along the route. Of course, you never quite know where that's going to be, or if indeed you're going to have that experience.
Well, do you know what, Chris? Breaking news, as we speak, Alan has very kindly messaged us to explain exactly where those whale photographs were taken. And
there you are.
Aptly, they were taken near Whale Channel, which is just down from Kitimat.
Okay. So, and I am just going to do this because I can. I'm just going to put that shot of Alan's, which I very much like, back on screen. And you can imagine it says any questions on the top of it.
I mean, it really is a spectacular photograph.
It's corker, isn't it?
Congratulations,
corker.
And what a wonderful wildlife experience. You know, what a great thing to share and to witness. Quite remarkable. Jill, sorry, not Jill. Sorry,
Chris. Just in case, you're wondering.
Sheila was wanting to know a little bit more about the opportunities for traveling there with us, and in particular about the range of small group tours that we do to Canada. Now, I know for a fact that we do an awful lot of small group tours to Canada. There's well over a dozen that we either sell in group tours operated by our overseas operators, and we do a number of them as well. And Sheila, what we can do is email you. And we can give you all of the links that you need to read about those particular group tours that are on our website. If anybody else is interested in group tours to Canada, then if you go to the Canada page on our website, there is a section devoted to just group tours, and there's well over a dozen different ones there. Anything from canoeing along the Yukon River to seeing orcas to Great Bear Rainforest, the whole lot is there. So there's a huge range there. Any highlights, Chris, group tours for you that you would recommend Sheila pay particular attention to?
Well, certainly keep an eye out for the trips on Roma and Odyssey, those trips. Keep an eye out for anything else that we might be putting into some of the lodges, and we know we've got some interesting things coming up. I was in discussion with someone a couple of days ago, a new lodge, actually it's a fishing lodge on the west coast of Vancouver Island, where I think we're going to be putting in some photographic trips, particularly to be photographing sea otters.
Oh, amazing.
How about that? Yeah. We've not done that before, but that's a possibility. That's something that I was discussing last week. Hey, also worth mentioning on that coast, which I didn't mention actually, I probably should have done, but on that coast, there's some great opportunities to see wolves. We've had fabulous wolf encounters along the coast there. And there was one occasion when we were just leaving a magnificent bear watching sighting, actually from Spirit Bear Lodge, and we had a sighting of about 8 or 9 wolves. How cool is that?
That's brilliant.
Really good. Some lovely other opportunities there, as I say, sea otters and all sorts of things. But keep an eye out for some of those things. There's some really interesting stuff on that coast.
Chris, Simon has messaged in just 3 or 4 minutes ago, and I dare say this is the trip for ice bears has piqued his interest, and he was asking whether there's much to do overnight in Whitehorse and Dawson. I can't imagine there's an awful lot to do there, but you've been to both of those places, haven't you?
I have, yeah, more than once. There's a very good burger bar in Whitehorse. That's about it. But Dawson, joking aside, Dawson is absolutely fantastic place.
This is all Gold Rush. This is all ex-Gold Rush area, isn't it?
Yeah. No, not ex. What it is? Yeah. I mean, but they're still. It's still a gold centre. But I mean, it's absolutely full of history. I mean, I know I'm going to sound extraordinarily ignorant, so please forgive me. But history has never especially interested me. But in Dawson, it's just fascinating. It's just wonderful. And visiting some of the, one or two very interesting restaurants and bars, and some really interesting people, some lovely walks along the river. It's a really cool place. It's worth mentioning that when we do that trip, if we were to book you on that trip to go up and see the ice bears, we have to build in 2 or 3 nights in Dawson, because it's very easy to get snowed in there.
Right.
So the way that it works with a helicopter, it's 2.5 hours by chopper up to the camp, and the helicopter then of course has to fly back. He has to make sure he's got a completely clear window of 5 or 6 hours of no snow, otherwise he'll have to abandon. So we spent 3 nights in Dawson on the way up. We were only due to spend 2, but he wasn't able to go up on one occasion, so we had to spend 3. But it was no problem. It's it's a really interesting place.
Yeah, great. Hey Chris, I'm going to wrap up with a very nice question, which is coming back to Great Bear Rainforest, and we've had many questions, all asking exactly the same thing, which is the best time of year to visit.
Best time of year to go to the Great Bear Rainforest, I would say, is any time between May and mid-October, depending on where you go.
Right. Okay. And to go during those times, are you likely to see everything there that you have shown us there? So the whales and the bears and so on. Are you likely to see orca at a certain particular time of year over another, for example?
There's resident orcas, so you should see orcas, pretty much any time.
Yep.
One of the reasons why I very deliberately showed Sydney on the southern part of Vancouver Island is because that's a really nice 2 or 3 night add-on to pretty much anything anybody does.
Yep.
It's just a lovely, you would stay in a hotel, very simple hotel, and go out whale watching a couple of times a day. And the whale watching there is good from May onwards. You wouldn't in the early part of that season, your opportunities to see things like humpbacks is not nearly so good. They're much better later in the season, but earlier in the season you may see grey whales. They won't be migrating up the coast. They're migrating up the coast. Well, April, May, they're migrating up the coast, out on the west coast. But yes, so to a greater or lesser degree, you will be able to see pretty much everything I've showed through this evening, throughout that season. But there are specific conversations we would need to have to make sure someone is going at exactly the right time of year to give themselves the very best opportunity of seeing exactly what they want to see.
Yeah.
And staying in the right place in order to do that, of course.
Of course, yeah. And ladies and gents, for all of the questions that have come in about tailor making as well, yes, the answer to that is yes. We of course, we can tailor make. It is what Wildlife Worldwide is one of the kings of doing. It's how Chris started Wildlife Worldwide. It has been the bedrock of everything that wildlife has done, and the group tours have grown exponentially, of course. But yes, tailor making is something that underpins really, everything that Wildlife Worldwide has done, and it's very straightforward to tailor make something for you if a group tour isn't exactly what you need.
And you're very welcome to email me and ask me questions on that. I know you'll put my email address, Nick, in the follow-up email, but you're very welcome to email me about this stuff. My email address is chris@wildlifeworldwide.com. And I will happily do my level best to answer any questions that I can and help design the itineraries for you.
Terrific. Well, look, Chris, thank you again. That was just a great presentation, and it's wonderful looking at such terrific photographs and seeing such wonderful scenery as well. And I know that it has inspired many who joined us this evening. And to all of you who have sat with us, thank you so much. As I said at the very start, genuinely is a real pleasure for us to host these evenings and to put them on and to spend the time putting these presentations together, because travel is what we all love to do, and travel is something that, like you all, and it is something that we live and breathe for. And you know, it is coming. You know, we are getting there. You know, with the announcement yesterday, it is great that there is a roadmap there that we can all begin to see that there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And I do hope that these presentations are providing even further inspiration. But as I say, we do love doing them, and I think we're going to be continuing to do these for well, ever, really. It's a wonderful way for us to stay engaged with what we do, but also stay in touch with you all as well. So you know, it's great being able to do these. So thank you all very much for joining us. If you haven't yet got our brochure, as you can see on the screen, it is available now. It's been available since the start of the year. And if you've been unlucky enough not to receive one, then you need to rectify that. And you can order it through our website, or you can give us a telephone call if you wish and just order it over the phone, or you can drop us an email at sales@wildlifeworldwide.com. And inside that brochure is a world waiting for you to visit. So do order one of those. If tonight has inspired you and you would like to book a Canadian holiday with us, then we would like to say thank you to you and give you £100 discount per person. I do think that there is a time frame on that. I think that there will be a book before a certain date, and I'm afraid I don't have that information in front of me. But if you quote that code, and again, I will email this to you tomorrow morning or this evening. If you quote the code KAZOOM21, you will be rewarded with a £100 discount per person. There will be a book before a certain date. It's usually a couple of weeks from now. So do take advantage of that. And our next Discover evening is going to be on Thursday. And Nick Garbett will not be having any technical issues, and he will be talking about the big cats of the world, which I know that I'll be coming in to watch, certainly. Chris will be hosting that. Yep. And I think really that draws tonight's presentation and this evening to an end. So thank you all very much indeed. Chris, thank you again. Great presentation.
Pleasure. And
we will look forward to seeing, we hope, all of you again on Thursday for Nick Garbett and the Big Cats. But for now, I'm going to end the evening, end the presentation, and hope you stay safe, stay well, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thank you and good night.
Good night.